anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. It is the Friday weekend edition, and we're grateful that you can join us today. We'll open up the phones a little bit later if you'd like to join the conversation. 1-800-351-1212. Jeff Mateer, Executive Vice President and Chief Legal Counsel for First Liberty Institute. Dr. Merrill Matthews, a commentator as well as a public policy analyst. And first of all, I thought we might just talk about the fact that less than a week away is Christmas. And the story we want to talk about is selling Christmas trees. And I have some experience in this because there was a service organization that every year I would help sell Christmas trees. And Jeff, sometimes it got so cold I was hoping the city would come and close us down. But apparently the city has closed down selling Christmas trees at Christmas time. And this is another one which, when I first got the memo, or I guess it was the press release, I said, this has got to be a joke. But it is not, is it?
No, you'd think this is a Babylon Bee piece, but,
yes.
but it's not. So this is up in New York, a village up there, Village of the Branch. Has decided to shut down the Catholic Church from selling Christmas trees at Christmas, and it makes. I mean, sometimes our cases are just stranger than fiction, right? I mean, this seems like this is like a Hallmark movie, or a scene from It's a Wonderful Life, and Mr. Potter is, we're going to shut down those Christmas tree sellers. Those Catholics are selling their Christmas trees. They've been doing it for 25 years. There's a Mayor Delaney, who sounds like an Irish-sounding name to me, but maybe. So we don't know the background of this other than it just makes absolutely no sense. So we sent a friendly demand letter to the village, advising them that what they're doing violates the First Amendment rights of this Catholic Church. The city is claiming that you can only have one fundraiser every 90 days. And so this church had, like a lot of churches, had a fall festival, which has a fundraising element, and then they were selling trees. But what's interesting, I was describing, because this is one of those, Kelly Shackelford, who's often here as a host on Fridays, was explaining to him this case, and he said, well, churches hold fundraising every Sunday, so they're going to shut them down from every. So again, stranger than fiction. It makes no sense. The city has not responded. We're hoping that this gets fixed right away, because obviously we're on the clock. So, Christmas is coming, and won't be a lot of Christmas tree sales after next Wednesday. But so hopefully this gets fixed quickly.
So explain how does a city do this? If they've passed a law, let's just take what they said at face value. If they've passed a law that says you can only do one fundraiser in 90 days, and they did one, in essence, two, should the mayor come out and say, we've got a law, we've got to live by the law, but we're going to change the law, or we're going to just ignore? How do you address the issue if there is a law that actually does apply like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first is you don't have to use your police to cite the Catholic Church for violating it. That's probably the first one. And they should amend this ordinance to take, from nonprofits at all, but certainly religious nonprofits. I mean, this is, again, it's an example of overregulation, no doubt. And who knows what prompted this? But there are too many fundraising events in the Village of the Branch, so people are, we don't want any more of those events. So you're going to shut down the Catholic Church from selling Christmas trees.
Well, again, that is one we didn't post, but you will certainly see it by going to firstliberty.org. We did post the one on Shields of Strength because a little bit later we're going to talk about the military, and each day I like to feature something. Yesterday we featured the prison ministries and some of that. That was just a great opportunity. Today I thought we'd focus on the military because a little bit later we'll be talking about the fact that if you heard the speech by President Trump the other night, it's 20 15-minute speech. He talked about giving $1,776, apparently taken out of tariffs to pay the military. I'm all for paying the military, but the Shields of Strength case is a good one because it has been such an encouragement to people in the military where they get essentially a dog tag that has Bible verses on it. But somehow that was seen as unconstitutional until recently.
Yeah, about 6 years ago, the then Department of Defense, today's Department of War, actually today's Department of War resolved it. The Department of Defense did not. But a guy named Kenny Vaughn owns and operates a business, which in a lot of ways is a ministry that makes dog tags that would have the emblem of the service, and then the flip side would have an encouraging verse. And they've produced something like 4 million of these dog tags, given away 2 million. And these are comforting and lots of great stories of family members of service. Family members of service members who, someone has passed away in service of our country and the dog tag, and hearing stories very, very much encouragement, including George W. Bush praising these dog tags several years ago. But the Department of Defense, in their not so much wisdom, decided that this violated the trademark of the U.S. government. We did argue in the case you can't trademark the word Army. Like, that's not just a U.S. thing. Army is something that nations have had for many, many years. But we've been in this battle. We filed the case back in 2019, so it's one of those 6-year plus battles. But fortunately, with a new administration, we were able to negotiate, which I think is almost a historic and number, as a multi-million-dollar settlement for Shields of Strength. One, getting payment for the damages for not being able to produce these dog tags the last 6 years. Perhaps even more importantly, they can continue producing them now.
Yes.
They can go forward and they can continue making the dog tags, having the scripture on the dog tags, and service members can get them. So huge. You really want. When I look back, when we talk about the great year at First Liberty, and we've had an awesome year at First Liberty, but this is a highlight because this has been such a battle. The government has just been battling us every step of the way in federal court, and to get a very, very favorable resolution for Kenny Vaughn and for Shields of Strength is certainly a major victory for us at First Liberty.
I might just mention, too, that first article is there for you to read about the case. Of course, there are press releases, there are legal documents, photos, and most importantly, it might be something you'd like to do for somebody that is in the military. So I just wanted to emphasize that as well. Going to take a break, but when we come back, I thought for just a few minutes, might get some comments, certainly about the massacre or the murder or whatever phrase you want to use of the 15 Jewish individuals there and the Hanukkah celebration there in Australia. Our second article there is by Cal Thomas. We've been talking about that this week, but certainly that is the case. We have some resolution to Brown University, and probably the most tragic way, but nevertheless, we'll talk about some of that. But then we're going to get into the fact that as we enter into 2026, going to be in the midst of midterms, and these midterm elections are kind of intriguing, and so I've posted a piece on that to talk about that. And then we've got a couple of very good articles by Dr. Merrill Matthews, as you might imagine, and a Penn and Dexter commentary, a piece by Victor Davis Hanson. We have a lot to cover, and we will do so right after these important messages.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
You know, it is estimated that Charles Wesley wrote over 6,500 hymns. Perhaps his best-known hymn is Hark the Herald Angels Sing. Over the years, it has been edited slightly, but the meaning and theology remains as he wrote it more than 2 centuries ago. It begins with a proclamation of the birth of Jesus. Hark the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn King. Peace on earth and mercy mild, God and sinners reconciled. The hymn reminds us why Christ came to earth. Jesus came into the world to bring peace, but many who sing this song fail to realize that it was to bring peace between us and God. Wesley's hymn reminds us that his birth was so that God and sinners could be reconciled. We are the sinners in this hymn, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have broken God's commandments and need to be reconciled with God. This was done when Christ died for our sins. This hymn by Charles Wesley goes on to describe who Jesus Christ is. Christ by highest heaven adored, Christ the everlasting Lord. Late in time behold him come, offspring of the Virgin's womb. Veiled in flesh the Godhead see, hail the incarnate deity. Pleased as man with men to dwell, Jesus our Emmanuel. This is the wonder of the incarnation. Jesus became the offspring of the Virgin's womb. God became man and was veiled in flesh, even though he was the incarnate deity. This Christmas week, let us all once again reflect upon the incarnation. How wonderful yet mysterious that God would become man and dwell among us, and that he would be willing to die on a cross for our sins. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free booklet on a biblical view on chemical abortion, go to viewpoints.info/chemical abortion. Viewpoints.info/chemical abortion. You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, Jeff Mateer, Merrill Matthews, and first article here after, of course, the one on the shields of strength. So actually, I guess the second article by Cal Thomas. And again, he's asking a very good question. How many more Jews must die before the world wakes up and does something about it? He goes on to remind us of the 15 celebrants of Jewish Hanukkah that were killed. And again, the point he is making is that Australia has about 117,000 Jewish people, and yet the Executive Council Australian Jewry reported a remarkable increase in anti-Semitic events. We're talking about firebombings, arson, graffiti, hate speech, and almost 5 times the average number that used to exist. And I'll come certainly to Jeff in just a minute because they've been dealing with that as well with some of their clients. But Dr. Matthews, for just a minute, I think it is important to recognize that if indeed you had seen all of this happening before this particular activity that took place on the beach, Bondi Beach there in Australia, you would think you'd at least post some law enforcement and try to address the potential for something like that happening.
I listened to a lady who was head of a council female rabbi in Australia talk about this, and she said what was so shocking about this is Australia historically has had no anti-Semitic trouble at all, up until around the attack in Gaza on Israel, where you saw Muslims sympathizers show out and 100,000 or so sort of saying death to Israel from the sea to the
river to the sea,
river to the sea and so forth. But she said it's been on the increase for the last few years, but prior to that there was just virtually no incidents of it. And so now apparently they've said, okay, we're going to have to do something because these were people who are looks like engaged in a terrorist attack upon Jewish people.
Yes. And again, this has been an issue that you've been addressing for some time, Jeff, and I know that Keisha has been on the program addressing that even more so, but there are just some places even in this country where anti-Semitism is rife, and it's something you've had to address there at First Liberty.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a rise, and it certainly has increased after October 7th 2 years ago. But even before that, you can see in our cases representing either Jewish groups or rabbis, Jewish leaders. I mean, it's just been an uptick across the board, and it's in places that you. Well, on one hand, you wouldn't think, but then you also realize there are a large Jewish population. So New York, we've certainly had several cases in New York where you just have communities who we don't want you here. And so you have from taking their property, that's a case in New York. And then we've got a homeowners association in Florida who just don't want Jews in their community. And it's really troubling. California is another one that we've got several cases. So it certainly rise. And I saw this week, read an article that talked about this is Republicans, and they're saying Republicans under 40 almost 50% of Republicans under 40 think the Holocaust was exaggerated, and 17% self-describe themselves as anti-Jewish. And that is troubling. And of course, we're in a world where on the right, you have people, and I don't know if you've talked about Candace Owens on the radio.
Oh, yes,
and
we
Fuentes.
have.
I mean, we have these people on the right
We have.
who are just there espousing hate against the Jewish people. And it's extremely troubling.
And, one of the things that may have helped Donald Trump win the election was when the breakouts in the cities happened, so many of these, the Democrats were supportive of this. And these were largely Democratic voters who were engaged in this. And that may have turned the Jewish vote in the United States tends to lean Democratic. That may have turned some people away from the Democratic Party saying we're going to embrace the Republican Party because they're criticizing this, and Democrats seem to be, if not supporting it, at least not condoning it loudly.
Yes. Well, and again, this issue of Candace Owens, first of all, you first started writing about that and have actually posted some pieces that we have there. I might just as a program note mention that those of you that actually do support us on $1 a day, $30 a month, you receive the particular booklets that we make available through Truth Team, and one of them coming out is on this whole issue of Christian Zionism. We mention names, we name names, we talk about some of those issues. And I think one of the things that's helpful that Cal Thomas puts in there is he's got a pretty extended quote from the Holocaust Museum, just reminding us of some of the sad history. I know that both of you are students of history, and we have some very sad chapters about how people in Western culture, even within the church, have treated Jewish people. So this is something we should take ownership of. And as Jeff mentions, it used to be a Democratic issue, and it still is, but it's also becoming a Republican issue, too.
No, it certainly is. And I think the other thing that Dr. Matthews mentioned when talking about Australia and what has changed, because Australia it is a fact, and I think actually Prime Minister Netanyahu pointed this out. Australia now supports a Palestinian state.
Yes.
And so all of a sudden it's almost legitimized and there is a huge misconception that every Jew is also an ardent supporter of Israel, and that's not the case. But at the same time, I don't think, and I heard today on a clip the Prime Minister of Australia talking about, well, now they're implementing a gun buyback. So what we're going to do is, and Australia has some of the strictest gun control laws in the world. And of course, that didn't prohibit this. But now, so what are we going to do? That this is really a gun problem. No, this is a culture problem in which you're at least you're not recognizing signs. And that's what the interviews that I heard over and over again is. Jewish people in Australia were expecting something like this because the rhetoric had ratcheted up.
Yes.
There had been threats, and maybe because of the past history, the Australians thought, that will never happen here. Well, I think the answer can happen anywhere. And it can certainly happen anywhere in America, but it can happen anywhere in the world.
And we need to mention it may have happened in Australia, it may have been happening in the U.S., but Europe has got a huge problem with this as well. Mm-hmm. This is not sort of a localized problem of anti-Semitism. It seems to be expanding almost internationally. I don't really hear about it in China, but we don't really get real news out of China. I haven't heard much about it in South America, but I don't know that we get much news from South America. But it does seem to be a growing international issue.
I might just hold up our booklet on anti-Semitism because back to the point you made, we have some of the facts and figures of what is happening in Europe. Because if you think it is bad in America or even beginning to be an issue in, say, Australia, this has been an ongoing problem for some time. And when they are talking about individuals who are Jews who are saying, I'm leaving Europe and going either to Israel, some of them were leaving Europe to go to Australia. That didn't turn out so well. It just illustrates the fact that, as you say, this is a global issue which we as Christians really need to speak to.
And it may be a growing problem for us, but you mentioned about our age. The people our age, we may have known people who had the numbers tattooed on them.
Yes.
We knew the generation who had been either in the camps or whose parents had been in the camps. But now we're getting past that generation, so it may be easier for younger people to say, well, I didn't know anybody like that, so I don't really believe it. But we have seen so many instances of people who were living in the camps and may have survived.
Yes. Well, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll get into some other issues, but I certainly would think that if you would like to join the conversation, feel free to give us a call, 1-800-351-1212. I might also point you to a piece yesterday that we posted by Noah Rothman in which he said sometimes the story isn't the story, it's the reaction to the story. You know, sometimes when you point out something wrong with something in the Democratic Party, well, the media talks about the reaction to that. And this one, you had people saying, well, isn't this sad how the right has actually camped on this issue of anti-Semitism? No, this has been around for some time. And so sometimes it's important for you to have some discernment to recognize sometimes the story is not the issue. It's the reaction to the story that is an issue. So I thought you might look that one up, as well as the piece by Cal Thomas, which to his credit gives us a little bit of history and also gives us a little bit of a context for what happened in Australia, and all the more reason for us to really stand with our Jewish friends. This particular booklet I'm holding up on anti-Semitism is available on our website. You just type in A Biblical View on Anti-Semitism. You can get a PDF there. And if you would like to join with us this coming year to be one of the members of the Truth Team, you'll be receiving that upcoming booklet on the issue of Christian Zionism, which would take on all sorts of issues. And we do name some of the names we just mentioned a few minutes ago and others, because that's an issue that I think we as Christians should speak out on as well. We come back, though, let's talk about the midterms. Going to be very contentious, and I think we have some indication of what might happen right after this.
Do not miss the fact that this is an exciting time in America. Record numbers of Gen Z returning to church, reading the Bible. God is clearly moving. But it's also a critical time. Without trustworthy biblical guidance, without spiritual mentors willing to disciple, those young people full of zeal today could be led astray tomorrow. And that's why I urge you to partner with Point of View and equip the mentors the next generation needs. When you support Point of View, you provide a wealth of resources to equip Americans to think biblically about every issue relevant to life today. Your support could supply the tools that someone needs to apply biblical truth in discipleship. So partner with us today, and your gift will be doubled through December 31st. So give today at pointofview.net, or you can call us 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, we're going to spend just a little bit of time looking ahead to 2026, because already as we start in January and in February, there are going to be some very significant races. Now, again, the first primary isn't primarily till March, but already individuals are asking for your vote, asking for your support as they look at the midterm elections. And there's a very good piece that we've posted here, which was kind of a summary of what the Republican National Committee chairman is talking about. But again, around the round table, I have Jeff Mateer and Merrill Matthews. And one of the things you can usually assume is that the party out of power in the midterms usually gains seats. And so that is certainly the case. I'll hold up this picture, which is not actually in the article, but it's one that I pulled from some other people that have been seeing the movement in congressional races. races, and they're all moving where the Republicans are losing ground and where Democrats are gaining ground. And the reality check that they asked there is it's not clear if voters are embracing Democrats or rejecting Republicans. And we're certainly going to get into the whole issue of the economy. I suspect also some Democrats that have been incumbents for a long time might find themselves in difficult races because they might say, what are you doing to help me be able to pay for my groceries and my gas and rent? What are you doing to help me actually be able to pay for insurance? But if nothing else, I just think this whole issue of the midterm elections has always been a challenge for every president. I think it's a real uphill challenge or a set of headwinds for the Trump administration and for Republicans.
We're about 10 months out from the midterm elections, probably 9 months when the first early voting starts.
Yes.
So it's not long, and there is a narrative that's being established that the economy is struggling, at least for a lot of people in the economy. Some people are doing fine. Some people are doing well, but many aren't. And that narrative is being established, and you see it in the numbers of consumer confidence down, business confidence down, employers laying off people. They're doing that for a number of reasons, but one of them is to think, we're not sure, we're still unsure about where the economy is going, so we don't want to be caught with too many people at one time and have to lay them all off of it. So you've got a number of negative things coming out in headlines, and that's setting a narrative that's going to be very hard for the president to try to overcome. He tried to say something about that. Was it Tuesday night or Wednesday night he came out with the speech? But I'm not. You get the sense that they feel like they're getting in trouble. And you even had Karl Rove in his piece in the Wall Street Journal yesterday talking about things are not looking good for Republicans right now. And if Republicans lose the House, you can almost be certain that there's going to be an impeachment of Donald Trump among the Democrats. May not pass the Senate, but there will be a number of investigations and other things that will change. And you'll have a lot of challenges to his efforts to try to do things by executive order, which Republicans haven't really challenged.
Yeah, I mean, I'll play procrastinator. I think it's going to be a disaster for Republicans.
I think so.
I think the Democrats have an issue to run on. Affordability is a good issue for them because I think the American people understand when they go to the grocery store, things cost more. And I'll talk about who the real problem was with that, but that is a good issue. And the president and his party are going to be tagged with the economy, and despite attempts to recast it, I mean, the economy is not great, and affordability is a real issue for many Americans. Now, I mean, I point back. It's the policies of the Biden administration that have caused a lot of the affordability issues, and you've got the new administration trying to deal with that. Although I'm not sure they're actually dealing with it, they may actually be causing more problems. But I think the Democrats have a great issue to run on because you can tie tariffs to affordability, you can tie inflation to affordability, and if
health insurance to affordability, everything that comes out of your pocketbooks. And I think when Americans look at their paychecks after they pay their bills, they have less right now. And again, I don't think it's all that is directly attributable to Donald Trump, but if you're the president, you own the economy, and I look what happened in Virginia. I know the article, Kerby, that you've posted about the midterms, where you've got the new chairman. Yeah. The new chairman saying, "Well, we're gonna, Trump." I mean, the difference is we have Donald Trump. Well, okay, how much campaigning did Donald Trump do in Virginia for Winsome Spears? What I've heard is none. And it may not have changed in hers, but the race that really that I was very disappointed in was the race for AG, because the Democrats nominated a horrible candidate, and the Republicans have a great candidate, had a great sitting AG, Jason Miyares, and had that gap lessened just a little bit, Miyares would have been reelected, and he wasn't. Instead, we have somebody just a horrible person becoming AG. So I just think this is going to be bad. Now,
for the Republicans, the positive is the Senate does line up very favorable for Republicans. Mm-hmm. And so it's probably very unlikely that the Republicans can lose the Senate just because of the numbers.
But Donald Trump is making the same mistakes that Barack Obama and Joe Biden did. So Barack Obama, he inherited a bad economy. We had that downturn in 2008, 2009. But it wasn't turning around very fast. And so they did what they call the summer of recovery, where we're going to try to convince you that everything is moving better, and it didn't. And then Joe Biden came out and said, Bidenomics is doing great. It's good economy, but people didn't believe it. And it really frustrated the administration, the Biden administration, because they felt like the economy was doing well, but people weren't convinced of that, and Biden kept trying to go out and convince them that it was doing well. What happened this week was the economy's not doing that well. President Trump went out to try to convince the people that the economy's doing really well. And this gets to a rule of thumb of mine. If you feel like you have to go out and convince the voters that the economy is doing really well, it's because the economy isn't doing really well. Mm-hmm. And I listened to the speech, and he was angry in parts, shouting in parts, strong in parts, resolute, made some truthful statements about the border getting under control and some other things of that nature. Also made some exaggerated claims about things. But I just don't think anybody really would be persuaded who was doubtful would look at that and say, okay, now I understand. I'm really doing well. I just didn't realize it.
I had the other day somebody that was using what they're now starting to call, but for the iPhone argument. And that is, but, just look at all the benefits we have right now. We have iPhones that are so much more powerful, and we have only 2.7% inflation, but it's usually called the iPhone argument. And we're a lot better off. And they get all upset with people saying, well, it was better in the 1950s and 60s when dad could go off to work, mom could stay home, they could afford a house, and they could afford sending kids to college. And they already argue against that, but we are in a better situation now. Well, in some ways, technologically, we are. I'm not sure we're better off culturally than we were. And again, it almost doesn't make any difference because, as in the next article we're going to look at that from you, is sometimes perception is a whole lot more important than reality.
That's right. Even you can make the case that the economy is in pretty good shape right now. You can make the case during the last couple of years that the economy was decent. But the public doesn't perceive that, and that's what makes the difference. Even if somebody's doing really well, if they perceive by going to the store and they see the grocery prices are higher, they go out and buy a ticket to something, they feel like, geez, I can't afford this ticket anymore. I used to be able to do this. We're cutting back on our Christmas presents and so forth. That affects their perception of how the economy is going.
Yes. Well, we're going to take a break and talk about whether or not affordability is a hoax and whether this is a A++++ economy, which is the piece by Dr. Merrill Matthews. But again, if you wanted to know the history, I'll just give you this one quote, because even here, the head of the Republican National Committee, the chairman of that, said what we're facing is a situation which is no surprise to anyone, where the party in power normally gets absolutely annihilated. Only a handful of presidents have been able to buck that trend over the past 150 years. And so the question is, how can we reverse that trend? That's not easy. Well, one of the ways you don't reverse the trend is to ignore it or to say that it's a hoax. And even the 20-minute message by the president the other day, as you said, maybe had some facts and figures, but maybe you need to find some other people to go out and make the case. Maybe the vice president, maybe some other individuals that can speak to this issue, maybe some members of Congress, because in some respects, Donald Trump is not on the ballot. In other cases, he is on the ballot. And it sometimes isn't fair that we sometimes blame presidents for bad economies, but also they tend to take maybe too much credit for good economies. But that's the reality we're in. We'll come back and talk about whether or not this is an A++ economy right after this.
According to Fortune magazine, Ford Motor Company CEO Jim Farley thinks America needs a wake-up call. Mr. Farley told Monica Langley, host of Office Hours Business Edition podcast, his company has 5,000 open jobs for mechanics. He said these jobs pay six-figure salaries. It's not just Ford that's having trouble finding people to fill manual labor positions. Mr. Farley said, "We are in trouble in our country. We have over 1 million openings in critical jobs, emergency services, trucking, factory workers, plumbers, electricians, and tradesmen. As we bring manufacturing jobs back to our shores, there's a gap between available jobs and the numbers of people willing and able to fill those positions." Fortune cites Bureau of Labor Statistics data, which show that as of August, there were 400,000 manufacturing job openings. At the same time, unemployment was up somewhat at 4.3%. A 2024 survey of 200 manufacturing firms showed half reporting difficulty recruiting and retaining workers as their top struggle. Jim Farley laments the lack of trade schools. He said one of the reasons people aren't filling these manufacturing jobs is that they do not possess the basic training needed. He told the podcast audience, "We are not investing in educating a next generation of people like my grandfather, who had nothing, who built a middle-class life and a future for his family." There's a mismatch. Recent college graduates are finding their degree is not necessarily the ticket to a job they really want to do. Wall Street Journal columnist Alicia Finley argues that the real cause of the mismatch is government subsidizing higher education, which has distorted the labor supply. We have too many newly minted recipients of bachelor's degrees entering the labor force, and a shrinking number of workers without college degrees or with associate degrees. Some Gen Zers are skipping traditional college and student loans and taking well-paying manufacturing jobs. Perhaps they'll bring some balance back into the market. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, if you'd like to join the conversation, 1-800-351-1212, 1-800-351-1212. Take some phone calls in just a minute if you'd like to join the conversation. Jeff Mateer, Merrill Matthews. And Dr. Merrill Matthews, why would a A++ economy have so many bankruptcies? And this was one of the articles on The Hill. We've posted it there so you can read it, or of course you can go there and find it. But you look at all sorts of examples, large companies, small businesses, farmers, even healthcare companies. And this idea of an A++ economy, well, that's right out of the mouth of Donald Trump, isn't it?
It is, yes. Yeah, the media asked him how he would rate the economy, and he said, "I would give it an A+++++++." So there's A with 5 pluses. That raised some eyebrows, but it's interesting because he sees the economy, at least he says he sees the economy as doing very, very well. And you heard that in his speech that he gave the other night. But I went and just looked at some of the bankruptcies because I've been seeing articles about this. Large companies are experiencing the largest number of bankruptcies that they've experienced in 15 years since the Great Recession. What about small companies, since they're sort of the backbone? And there's a couple of ways. There's several ways that small companies and even mom and pops can file bankruptcy, but they're hitting new highs in the number of bankruptcies that they're seeing. And so I ask about farmers. Farmers are an important part. They have land. They're important, but Trump is giving them $12 billion, depending upon where it is. It's coming from the tariff money or someplace else, but he's giving them $12 billion because so many farmers are struggling right now because when Trump raised the tariffs on China, China started buying their soybeans and corn and other things from Brazil and other countries, and that meant because China is the U.S., I believe the U.S. largest purchaser of soybeans. They use a lot of soybeans in China, and when they stopped purchasing it, we didn't have a market to sell that to, and so farmers are having to go and pay for storage for the soybeans that weren't selling. That drops the price, and so an awful lot of farmers are saying, "I'm gonna go bankrupt if we can't solve this problem." So Trump is looking at giving them $12 billion in order to sort of subsidize them for the lack of sales. Now, China is supposed to be coming in and buying some. There's complaints China isn't doing it as fast as they said they would do it. But then you've got healthcare companies, because we're talking so much about healthcare and all the money going to healthcare. You would think the healthcare companies are doing really, really well. If you follow the news, a lot of small rural hospitals are closing because they rely on Medicaid. There's been some cuts to Medicaid. They're closing. And a number of healthcare companies are not able to make it anymore. And I just mentioned some in there. Plus, S&P Global mentions that 3 healthcare companies with over $1 billion in revenue and assets are ending up filing bankruptcy. There's a lot of struggles going on in the country right now. A lot of this, I would argue, is based upon companies not sure what's going to happen next year.
Right.
And this has been, I think, if Trump wanted to try to solve the problem, giving people a certain amount of assurance of what the economy is going to be like next year and stability would go a long ways toward doing that. But companies not sure what's going to happen. For instance, with Brazil, he had high tariffs on Brazil. Brazil then convicted Jair Bolsonaro, the former president. He went and said, well, okay, we're going to raise the tariff to 100% on Brazil. Now I think he's come back down after talking to the president of Brazil. You don't know where these are going to last and when they're going to last. And so that creates a lot of uncertainty, and businesses are reluctant to invest and build on and so forth in uncertain times. So if Donald Trump was to give us some stability and take care and resolve some of this uncertainty, I think he would solve a lot of his problems.
You know, one thing the market does not like, and probably top of the list, is uncertainty. And I'll just take you back to October 10th, in which Donald Trump on Truth Social said 100% tariff on China. And you look at what happened in the stock market, you look what happened to almost everything except gold drops off of that just instantaneously. And you think, okay, as you just mentioned a minute ago, 100% tariff on Brazil. I forget what date that one is. And you can actually begin to see the movement in the stock market. And that's only part of the economy. The problem is yes, in some respects, the economy is doing pretty well if you own assets. If you are in Wall Street right now, that's looking pretty good. We call it a K-staged economy. The letter K, some goes up, some goes down. And so if you have assets and you have gold and you have stocks and you have land and things like that, you're probably doing very well. And some of these major companies are doing very well. But then we talk about the fact that some of these small businesses are hurting, record number of bankruptcies, farmers, even the issue of healthcare spending. Some of them are doing quite well, by the way, but rural hospitals are closing down. So it's a real mixed issue that you have to look at individually, don't you?
Yes, and remember, in Trump's first term, the issue was drain the swamp.
Yeah,
and we love that term. He didn't really drain it very much, but what's happened now with all the tariffs and other things that are going on, every company goes to their trade association. They get their trade association to contact and contract with lobbying groups in Washington, send people to Washington, make donations to their elected officials and so forth to try to get either keep my tariffs from being high or make my competitors' tariffs higher. And can I get a bailout here for the farmers, and somebody else don't give a bailout to them? It has filled the swamp with all the people who are trying to get involved in here, because if you're a company, you don't want to be hit with high tariffs and other things. It really creates a lot of problems.
Yeah, I think that the other thing that in Kerby, you mentioned like the stock market. So if you just looked at the stock market, you'd say, oh, it's doing pretty well. But what segments of the stock market? I mean, companies that are into AI, and we all think there's an AI Bible, AI bubble.
Maybe an AI Bible too.
A bubble. Well, maybe a Bible. They probably the AI can do everything, right? But there's an AI bubble that could burst, probably will burst, just like we did it with the tech, right? There are AI is in a lot of AI companies are overvalued, and they'll come back to reality. That will impact. And so if that's the only thing you're watching is the stock market. But I just go back to, just going to the grocery store. People know that prices are higher today. Now it is lower at the pumps.
Yes, it is absolutely.
That's
especially
good.
This month, December. Yeah. It's really gone down.
And maybe a historical, really very lows. In a decade lows or something they're anticipating. And Trump's talking about $1.99 gasoline. Of course, if we keep seizing Venezuelan tankers, and as long as we put that oil in the market, I guess it's fine. But if we somehow affect that, but again, I go back to that. The same concern is, I think, if I were advising him, what I'd say is just. Is all right. A little more focus on the facts, and say, look, I inherited. I think you just do what I inherited a horrible economy. I've been working really hard to rectify that economy. We're working on getting interest rates lower because that hurts on home ownership. And emphasize those things. The other thing, if I'm doing with the Trump campaign, I talk about the things you're doing really well at. Mm-hmm. Because on foreign affairs, I feel pretty good about the Trump administration. I certainly feel really good about the Trump administration on religious liberty, on issues like that. But don't exaggerate what's happening because I mean it is not an A++ economy. It just isn't. Just say it's incomplete. Give me time. This is what I want to do. But don't say it's A++ or that affordability is a hoax. I mean, affordability is not a hoax to average Americans.
That's right. Well, we're going to take a break and we'll come back and get into some other issues. Our Republicans turning Uncle Sam into Uncle Sugar. We talked about that last week, but some of that gets to, of course, some of the statements that the president made. Last week we were talking about whether or not we're going to give $2,000 to various Americans. We're talking about giving $1,776 to people in the military and a variety of other articles that we still need to work our way through, including, of course, this one by Dr. Merrill Matthews. We'll be back right after this.
Who can you trust? Years ago, many of us could probably have provided a fairly long list, but today it seems we almost can't trust anyone. Educators don't even know what a woman is anymore. Many so-called public servants have shown all they care about is themselves. The FBI has been accused of bias, law-breaking, betrayal, and journalism. It's largely corrupt, with no Clark Kent standing up for truth, justice, and the American way. All of this is why Point of View Radio is more important than ever, and your part in supporting us is more needed than ever. Do your part today in supporting trustworthy truth. Stand with us and help push back the lies and the darkness. Visit pointofview.net. Don't put it off. Take a moment right now and click on that big blue button that says Donate Now. Or call to invest at 1-800-347-5151. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour today, and we have in studio with us today Merrill Matthews and Jeff Mateer. And if you would like to join the conversation, 1-800-351-1212. We've, of course, talked about the midterm elections, talked about what happened in Australia, bankruptcies. But there's another issue here, and that is, Dr. Matthews, we already, of course, talked about some of this last week, are Republicans turning Uncle Sam into Uncle Sugar. But I wanted to broaden it because in one sense. Republicans want to hand out taxpayer dollars, and last week our conversation was about $2,000 going to individuals, or even the American Rescue Plan providing $1,400 to eligible adults. And then, of course, now I just mentioned earlier wanting to, as the president said, handing out $1,776 to people in the military. But let's not forget that at this same time, Democrats are saying, no, we need to actually pass these enhanced subsidies to make affordable, at least make Obamacare affordable, back to the affordability issue, and in the past wanted to forgive student loans and all the rest. And it seems like whether it's a Republican administration or a Democratic administration, nobody seems to be aware of the fact that we're $38 trillion in a national debt.
$38 trillion, $1.7 trillion in deficit in this last fiscal year.
Yes.
The Congressional Budget Office predicts it will be roughly that same all the way out to 2034, where it predicts by that time it will be down to $1.5 trillion deficit. So these are huge deficits, and people keep saying, I don't know that we can go much longer before people will no longer buy our debt. In fact, I heard, I can't remember who it was, but the Treasury is going to have to step up and sell, I think, something like $11 trillion in debt.
In January.
In January.
I think $8 trillion in January alone. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, just a huge amount of money, because when they sell this debt, they come due after a while, 2 months, 6 months, 2 years, 10 years, and they've got to resell that stuff. And so it's an awful lot of money, and we've been fortunate that countries and individuals have been willing to buy it so far, but that may not last forever.
Well, again, I think your point is well taken, that people don't realize that somebody has to pay for the debt. And in the past, you could depend on some of these countries, like sometimes China.
China was, really, not anymore.
Japan is really having trouble.
Yeah.
Saudi Arabia, a variety of others. And in some respects, it's back to we owe it to ourselves. But even there, how many Americans want to buy T-bills, treasury bills, and things of that nature? So they're trying to figure out with stable coins and a variety of other things, because to have a stable coin, you have to buy some of these treasuries, just doing anything to keep it going. And this is, I think, the great challenge that I wouldn't want to be the Secretary of Treasury right now, Scott Bessent, because you're just trying to, basically your job is to try to sell the debt of the United States government.
Right. And if you come to a point where you're trying to sell it and there's not many people want to buy it, and that happens occasionally, they have to raise the interest rate to attract buyers. And so when you raise that interest rate, that adds to our interest, because we're paying so much in interest now. I think we're about $1 trillion or so in interest every year. It keeps adding to itself. And the bad part is, both Republicans and Democrats both talk about fiscal responsibility, but they just never do it.
Yes. Well, in my commentary that came out just the other day, and that was in December 17th, is on economic reset. So if you don't take for face value what we're talking about around the table, Glenn Beck is talking about this idea of an economic reset. Of course, we've already talked about Lawrence Lepar's The Big Print. Or how about probably one of the best-known hedge fund managers in the world, a billionaire, Ray Dalio, who's written a book just recently, I got on my shelf, How Countries Go Broke. And they're all saying, if you don't want to end up like the Weimar Republic in Germany, or Rome in its latter days, or even what was happening to Great Britain at the end of World War I and World War II, you have to figure out some way to constrain spending. But we're not doing any of that.
No, and that's, again, $38 trillion, right? $38 trillion. And of course, that is such a large number. None of it just kind of washes off. But what is it? And I pulled up the national debt clock, which and then it keeps going.
Yeah.
As we're speaking, there's another. But it breaks down to $112,000 per American.
Yes.
For everybody, 100. So right now, to pay off the debt, let's go knocking. And how many Americans right now could write a check to the federal government for $112,000? But instead, we want to give back, and again, honorable service members, I get that, the 1776, or this, the tariff rebate of $2,000 or something that we're going to get. But no, we don't have the money. We don't have the money to do this, and we need to have responsible elected officials who recognize, because the day of reckoning is coming. And what would our economy be? And I'll ask our economic expert, what would our economy be like if it were half?
Mm-hmm.
But let's say we actually, like in the state of Texas, we actually have a balanced budget.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, that's right. State of Texas, we don't have a state debt. So we're never have to worry about the state of Texas declaring bankruptcy, because they pass a budget. That's all you can spend. You can't spend any more. Actually, we have a budget surplus in Texas. But what would our economy be like if we didn't have this crippling national debt?
Especially when, as you pointed out just a minute ago, you said it real quickly, but it's worth mentioning again, the interest on the debt is larger than the Defense Department or the War Department, whatever you want to call that. And that is just horrific.
Right. And I think the sense is it's so bad now. Well, what's a few more? I mean, but think about it. If you're managing your home finances at home, and you said, "Oh, my credit card debt is so crushing. Oh, here comes another one. Here's another credit card. Let's just sign up for this one." And I guess on my death, someone will deal with it. And it's a problem. And it's a Democrat problem, but it's a Republican problem. And it's so, who are the budget? There used to be, right? When
budget hawks.
There used to be budget hawks.
Yes.
Phil Gramm, I think, was a budget hawk.
Rand Paul gets half credit.
Rand Paul, yeah. But
that's about it.
Maybe Massey,
Thomas
in the
Massey.
House.
Yeah.
Chip Roy at times. We'll hear Chip at times, but gosh, they're just. The Republicans are not. We don't even talk about this issue. Instead, we're talking about let's give money to service members. Let's give children accounts. Let's spend
money to everybody. And then if you oppose that, then the government shuts down or something of that nature, and we have to keep the government open. And so you get pressured as a member of Congress, even if you don't want to spend that money. Is a government shutdown better than not doing that? So it is a very tough situation.
We always know Jeff was ready to shut down the government. But
I'm always for it.
we just had the longest shutdown over what? Enhanced subsidies. So when we come back, Dr. Matthews, let me put you on the spot for just a little bit, because we have had some questions about what are we going to do? These poor people will suffer. And I think there are some answers that have been put forward about letting associations actually put together health care plans, medical savings accounts, and love to get your thoughts about that, since that's the issue at the moment and on the table. So we'll talk about that right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
It is estimated that Charles Wesley wrote over 6,500 hymns. Perhaps his best-known hymn is Hark the Herald Angels Sing. Over the years, it has been edited slightly, but the meaning and theology remains as he wrote it more than 2 centuries ago. It begins with a proclamation of the birth of Jesus. Hark the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn King. Peace on earth and mercy mild, God and sinners reconciled. The hymn reminds us why Christ came to earth. Jesus came into the world to bring peace, but many who sing this song fail to realize that it was to bring peace between us and God. Wesley's hymn reminds us that his birth was so that God and sinners could be reconciled. We are the sinners in this hymn, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have broken God's commandments and need to be reconciled with God. This was done when Christ died for our sins. This hymn by Charles Wesley goes on to describe who Jesus Christ is. Christ by highest heaven adored, Christ the everlasting Lord. Late in time behold him come, offspring of the Virgin's womb. Veiled in flesh the Godhead see, hail the incarnate deity. Pleased as man with men to dwell, Jesus our Emmanuel. This is the wonder of the incarnation. Jesus became the offspring of the Virgin's womb. God became man and was veiled in flesh, even though he was the incarnate deity. This Christmas week, let us all once again reflect upon the incarnation. How wonderful yet mysterious that God would become man and dwell among us. and that he would be willing to die on a cross for our sins. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free booklet on a biblical view on chemical abortion, go to viewpoints.info/chemical abortion. Viewpoints.info/chemical abortion. You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, let's get into a couple of issues that are front and center, and one of those is, will these enhanced subsidies that were passed in the past, by the way, during the pandemic continue? That was one of the reasons, Dr. Matthews, for the shutdown, because the argument was, if we don't provide these enhanced subsidies, individuals in Obamacare are going to have sticker shock, and yes, they will. Some of them will see that their premiums will double, and yet at the same time, are we just sending money into a, if you will, financial black hole because of some of the problems that 10 years ago you were talking about in terms of the problems with the Affordable Care Act?
So let me mention one of the things. You're stressing enhanced subsidies because the media often does not.
Yes.
They tend to say the subsidies will go away at the end of the year. No, the subsidies on Obamacare will still be there. The original subsidies, which went up to like 400% of poverty, you still were able to get some subsidy.
Right.
So the main subsidies are still there. It's the enhanced subsidies that were passed in 2021 and then reauthorized again, I think, in 2022 or 2023 that are going away. We think. As it stands right now, they are going away. So that's an important point. And then secondly, the media often say, now this person's premium is going to go from this to that, but that usually doesn't include the subsidies that will insulate them. About 85% of the population got subsidies from the taxpayer covering their Affordable Care Act. And a lot of times it was little or no money out of pocket for people if they were lower income. A lot of that will still be there, but premiums are going up, both because healthcare spending is going up, because the incentives in Obamacare are to spend more. It's that it doesn't encourage people to try to save. And so, yes, the premiums going up, plus they ignored all actuarial rules when they created Obamacare. And so we said back in 2010 and then 2014 when this was coming in online, the premiums are going to go up because they're ignoring actuarial principles. And that's exactly what happened.
Well, again, I have to say, Jeff, that anybody that remembers history knows that they had to have some creative parliamentarian rules, is a nice way to say that, so that actually it was passed just by the votes of Democrats. No Republican voted for it, but now Republicans are getting blame for something that was the signature issue of Barack Obama, a Democratic president, and was passed only by the votes of Democrats. And now, of course, this somehow is a Republican problem.
Right. Well, although, and this has been, I feel like I've been more critical of Republicans I've been in a long, long time. But let's not forget that the Republicans did have and have majorities in the Senate and the House and the presidency. They had it the first Trump term for 2 years, and they have it now. And what have they not done, although they campaigned on many times, repeal Obamacare. Right. And it was repeal and replace Obamacare.
Yes. It was the replace that was always the problem.
Yes.
And what have they done? They've not done that.
No.
And so, yes, Barack Obama gave us Obamacare. The Democrats gave us Obamacare over the objections of Republicans. Republicans then ran against that for many, many years on repeal. They finally get control, and they just didn't do it. And so, I mean, the blame can be spread around to everyone.
Good point.
But for the points that Dr. Matthews is making, I mean, it was from the onset. It was going to be a failure.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the end game, right? The end game, Obamacare. I mean, there's no doubt the end game was to have a system like they have in England or in Canada, where we had nationalized health. And that was the end game. This was just the first part of it. And of course, the first part has been a failure. And I don't think Americans are ready, or hopefully will never be ready, for a national health service.
But Vermont Independent Senator Bernie Sanders, who's been the big supporter of a government-run healthcare system, points out these days that most of the Democratic senators will co-sponsor his legislation now for that. Used to just be a handful, 2, 3, 5, something like that. Now it's nearly all of the Democratic senators, and we see the Democrats in general, when they do the polling, are consistently say now socialism is probably okay, and that's what they're trying to do, is to get us to a basically a socialist-run healthcare system. And we're not far from it now, because you've got roughly 60 million Americans in Medicare. That's a government-run program. You've got about 75 million Americans in Medicaid. That's a government-run program. You have a couple million people in the military. That is a government-run healthcare program. And then you have Obamacare that covers about 25. It works with the private sector, but it's funded through a sort of a government program. So you're real close to a government-run healthcare system, even as we talk right now.
Let's talk about the alternative, because the other day I tried to be fair to what was introduced by the Republicans under the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, and a couple of key points. One is that would allow associations to actually begin to develop something that could be for their employees through health care insurance. The other idea was buying health insurance across state lines. And another one that you've talked about is medical savings accounts. And if you reject the idea of socialized medicine, are any of those ideas better for the Americans?
So what they call the health reimbursement arrangements, which are out right now, I've been talking about what's called large health savings accounts. The health reimbursement arrangements don't typically allow people to keep money they don't spend. I think I saw something saying they were going to try to allow them to do that. But what they essentially wanted to do was to say an employer could deposit this money into your account instead of buying health insurance for you, and now you could take the money from your health reimbursement arrangement and you could buy into an employer plan, or you could go out and buy your own health insurance. So that's a plus, because it gives people the ability to be able to shop for health insurance. It would be better if they could keep the money they didn't spend, because that gives them an incentive to say, where's the best deal I can get on insurance? So that's one thing. Association health plans, this is a technical deal, but large companies can do what we call self-insure under a law called ERISA. That means they bypass the insurance companies. They may use an insurance company to manage the paperwork, but they essentially fund the health care themselves. The company does. They bypass a lot of federal regulations and state regulations when they do that. So there's been a long time push to allow associations. Let's say you're an actuary and you're a member of the American Actuary Association. Yeah. The actuaries could then, under this, decide to offer a health insurance plan that self-insures under ERISA, like large companies. They're able to offer better coverage for less money and able to do that. That's one of the things they want to do. And then they also want to allow people to take the money and go out and spend directly on health care. That's a good element to it. So they've got some plans there, but they sort of pull these together at the last minute, as Jeff mentioned. They've been running on repeal and replace since 2010, and they've never had a replacement plan. They've never had one, and they tried to get one in 2017. It was failed by John McCain, the Maverick.
There we go.
But even then, it took him 7 months to come up with a plan.
Yeah. And I was just thinking that let's use First Liberty as an example. You've got a lot of employers. Your biggest cost, no doubt, is salary, but second is health care. And just, again, whether you're a big organization or a small organization, whether you're a big ministry and church, whether you're a small one, whether you're a big business or a corporation, this issue of health care, that's where the prices are going up and skyrocketing.
For our young families, first off, it's an issue for everyone, but especially our young families.
Yes.
And I hear from them just, almost on a weekly basis, someone is saying about, and, First Liberty is our board has been very generous in what we can provide our employees, but, we're a nonprofit. We have to navigate through those issues. And, when I not revealing much, but we were excited to hear our premiums were going up just a little less than 10%, and we were happy with that.
So prior to Obamacare, you could go out and buy a policy for a kid added on to yours for maybe $40 a month, $50 a month, because kids 2 to 18, the healthiest segment of the population. Obamacare essentially outlawed those, and so you have to pay the same thing for that. And for people, young families that had 2 or 3 kids, it made it just very, very expensive for the employer, or the family couldn't afford the policy.
Yeah. Well, again, those are some issues I thought we'd just put on the table. And if you have more questions, of course, we've posted a couple of articles by Dr. Merrill Matthews. I'm sure you'll be writing about a lot more. And I'm not going to make a prediction, but I'm not sure we're going to pass enhanced subsidies in the next 24 hours. And somewhere along the line, Congress is going to take a break. But it also illustrates one of the signature issues in 2026 during the midterm, don't you think? So that is certainly the case. We'll come back, a couple of other articles to focus on. And before we're all done, Penn and Dexter has written a very good commentary, which we'll talk about maybe in the last segment, about the job market mismatch and some of the issues we should address there. So let's, if we can, take a break. And when we come back, we'll continue our conversation. But if you would like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. If you say, boy, you've covered a lot of material, I'd like to read it for myself, we have posted those articles on the website at pointofview.net. We'll be back right after this.
Where does moral truth come from? According to 58% of Americans, individuals determine moral truth. A quarter of Generation Z says society determines moral truth, and morality can even change over time. Only 42% of Americans believe that truth comes from God. I don't know about you, but I find these numbers extremely troubling. It really is a crisis of truth, and that crisis has consequences. Look at society. Evil is called good, good called evil. People with biblical beliefs are called bigots, or worse, they're canceled. But there is hope. The Bible promises the truth will set us free, and that's why Point of View is relentless in our commitment to the ultimate source of moral truth, God's Word. At Point of View, we know that God's truth is eternal, and if we stand together, we can help more Americans apply His truth in their daily life. Help Americans find truth again by giving at pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, let me just mention as a program note that on Monday we're going to have in studio with us Howard Goldthwait, and he is the Senior Director of Creative Strategy for First Liberty Institute. I've actually put up here, next time we do a shot farther away from our table, you will see 3 of the books that he has been involved with. And I thought if for just a minute I might just maybe have Jeff preview that, because if you have young children, really of any age, to learn a little bit more about the Declaration, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, just our nation's history, the idea of separation of church and state, these books that you've put out through First Liberty are outstanding. We're going to spend some time talking about that with him on Monday.
Yeah, and it's a great thing. I mean, it's a giveaway for us. We actually give them to our supporters, and Howard and his team have done a great job of really, it's taking and really a children's book and taking early American history and laying it out with the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. So it's really, really exciting.
Might just mention that one of the things we are focusing on in 2026, looking ahead to some positives, is, of course, we have that banner up there right now, Restoring America's Godly Heritage. Of course, when we last time had the Truth Team, We even had a Patriot Pack, and it had everything from One Nation Under God. I'll hold up this booklet here. One on the Federalist Papers, one on the Bill of Rights, one on constitutional interpretation, even one on patriot pastors. A lot of things that we need to know about our history, and it is important for us to teach this to our children and grandchildren. But one of the things I think people will find if they go through some of the books that Howard Goldthwait has put together is, even as adults, there's some things we learn about that we never were taught in school.
Yeah, no, it's been a good process for me. Obviously, I'm in the process of editorial review, and we have a historian professor who also helps us. Howard's really good at rhyming.
Yes, he is. If you love poetry, that's what these books are all about.
Howard's very good, and the illustrations are just wonderful. But I mean, so much. We're so frustrated that so many Americans, we do these, we have another where we do these man on the street interviews where you got one of our guys and asking them questions, what rights are protected by the Bill of Rights? And I mean, as you know, Kerby, I mean, so many people have no idea. Or what's the First Amendment protect?
Yes.
Which you would think, I mean, but again, so many. And so this is just, a good opportunity for your grandchildren, children, in a pretty simple, creative way to understand some key principles of our American family. The last one explains the development of the Constitution, even talks about the compromise and creating our Constitution, and that James Madison is known as the father of the Constitution, and why we have a Bill of Rights, why that was important, a key in getting the Constitution passed with the promise of the Bill of Rights and the enactment of the Bill of Rights, and obviously the First Amendment being and the protection of religious liberty being the first phrase of the First Amendment. So, yeah, an important project, important for our children. I'm glad you're going to have Howard on.
Just really good books. And, of course, I actually was doing a Bible study in the 1980s, and Howard and his wife Betsy were in the class.
I did not know that.
And so I have known him longer than I've known either of you two, which is something which is really fun that he's actually been able to be involved in that. I might just mention, of course, we have some booklets on everything, One Nation Under God, and, of course, the idea of the 10 amendments, which are known as the Bill of Rights. I also have a commentary coming out in about a week or two, one on John Locke, one on the one on the Bill of Rights, and some other issues, just because as we get into 2026, 250 years since the Declaration of Independence, and that is the case. To put that up against this piece by Victor Davis Hanson, Can the Dark Ages Return? And again, I'm talking to two individuals that are students of history, and he reminds us that Western civilization arose in the 8th century BC under Greece. The Roman Republic inherited and enhanced the Greek model. For a millennium, the Republic and the subsequent empire spread Western culture, which really was inseparable from Christianity. We've even had some people on the program that say, to understand Western culture, you have Rome plus Christianity gives you Western culture. But once you get rid of Christianity, we're sort of back to Rome. And he reminds us that we had some dark ages, roughly from 500 AD to 1000 AD. Then eventually you had the Enlightenment and the rest. And just points out something that Victor Davis Hanson points out that I quoted the other day from Glenn Beck, pointed out, if you are a little bit concerned about the future of America and Western civilization, you should be, because some of the things that led to the decline of Western civilization are on the horizon today, aren't they?
Yes, and he talks a bit about tribalism in there.
Yes.
And one of the unique factors of the United States is you have had people, let's say from different tribes, who've come together, and we form a nation where tribalism isn't quite what it was. I mean, you still may have Republicans, Democrats, but by and large, historically, we've been able to get along with people from different cultures, different backgrounds, different classes, different financial backgrounds, and so forth. And we're one of the few countries that was able to do that. And I think he's concerned that we're seeing some tribalism rising again.
My argument that I'll make, and you guys can disagree, is that we have been a melting pot culture, but the problem with that is with things like DEI and with the idea of relativism, when you start saying, well, I want everybody to eventually assimilate, you have the elites going, well, what are we going to assimilate to? Because this is a culture culture that is riven with slavery and racism, and we can't necessarily say that the values of America are positive. And so whereas before we could melt people together, you had to be Polish American, Italian American, whatever it might be, but today you have Somalis in Minnesota that say I have more allegiance to Somalia than I do to the United States of America.
I think that's exactly that's exactly true. I mean, we don't have we're not transmitting American values because across our population, certainly for immigrants who come here legally, let alone those who come here illegally. Public schools in the past used to do that. Now they don't do that. Instead, they transmit values that are contrary to American values. And so we at first we've been talking about. I mean, there's no guarantee America exists 30 years from now. I mean, I don't ever remember thinking about that. But it's absolute. There are no guarantees. I think the other thing, and he has a couple lines in here about the change in he says ever more sophisticated machines and infrastructure. I mean, AI, the world of AI, and you know what is happening there, and that the potential to transform not just America's economy but the world's economy. And what is a world of AI machines taking away a lot of jobs, and then you combine that with a populace that's so focused on pleasure, just generally, and because we're not, I mean, the work ethic and, again, the transmission of those values, if those have been lessened, what does the world look like where AI is performing jobs? And then, I mean, who's running AI? Who's profiting from AI? And then you have, listening this morning, driving into work about it's the Brits, so it's the Brits. So I probably could stop with the Brits. I could have said the French, but this is the Brits. But the idea of universal, and I'm going to mess up the time.
UBI,
UBI. Universal basic income, and why that will be necessary. And this guy was saying, is a problem listening to the BBC. A lot of cracks on the BBC. You wouldn't know anybody who's ever on the BBC, would you?
I used to be on the BBC.
I know. That's why I bring it up. But maybe you need to go back and teach them some basic economics. They need some basic economics. But this is something that we need to do. And then the comment says, well, in America they kind of already have it. I was thinking, kind of already have it. Well, Social Security. They were using that as an example. But if we're headed what that is then, I mean, will we enter into, and then democracy still survives in that world? It's scary. I'm glad I'm a Christian and I know who wins.
That's right. And I might just point out that the January issue's on artificial intelligence because we think these are important issues. And churches aren't talking about this. A lot of Christian organizations aren't talking about this. And we are talking about it here on Point of View.
And I'll just mention that some tech billionaires, and I think Elon Musk, has suggested that we should go to a universal basic income.
Yeah. Well, we even had a Democratic candidate talking about UBI, which is where we came from, which is a good setup for what we're going to talk about in just a minute, because Penna Dexter's commentary is one that you can hear right now if you're on computer. And she's talking about a job market mismatch. So we'll come back and chat about that for just a minute, because you have the CEO of Ford Motor Company said, I've got 5,000 open jobs for mechanics. These jobs pay six-figure salaries. And heard somebody else the other day say, I've got that many need for electricians, but we're sending people into college, not to trade school. So we'll talk about that right after this.
According to Fortune magazine, Ford Motor Company CEO Jim Farley thinks America needs a wake-up call. Mr. Farley told Monica Langley, host of Office Hours Business Edition podcast, his company has 5,000 open jobs for mechanics. He said these jobs pay six-figure salaries. It's not just Ford that's having trouble finding people to fill manual labor positions. Mr. Farley said, we are in trouble in our country. We have over 1 million openings in critical jobs, emergency services, trucking, factory workers, plumbers, electricians, and tradesmen. As we bring manufacturing jobs back to our shores, there's a gap between available jobs and the numbers of people willing and able to fill those positions. Fortune cites Bureau of Labor Statistics data, which show that as of August, there were 400,000 manufacturing job openings. At the same time, unemployment was up somewhat at 4.3%. A 2024 survey of 200 manufacturing firms showed half reporting difficulty recruiting and retaining workers as their top struggle. Jim Farley laments the lack of trade schools. He said one of the reasons people aren't filling these manufacturing jobs is that they do not possess the basic training needed. He told the podcast audience, "We are not investing in educating a next generation of people like my grandfather, who had nothing, who built a middle-class life and a future for his family." There's a mismatch. Recent college graduates are finding their degree is not necessarily the ticket to a job they really want to do. Wall Street Journal columnist Alicia Finley argues that the real cause of the mismatch is government subsidizing higher education, which has distorted the labor supply. We have too many newly minted recipients of bachelor's degrees entering the labor force, and a shrinking number of workers without college degrees or with associate degrees. Some Gen Zers are skipping traditional college and student loans and taking well-paying manufacturing jobs. Perhaps they'll bring some balance back into the market. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes, let me just mention that one of the things we always make available to you are the commentaries. I write a daily commentary Monday through Friday, and if you go to our Viewpoints section, you can click on See More Viewpoints. You'll see mine today actually has to do with one of the Christmas carols, but you can very easily, if you would like, sign up so that this will arrive in your inbox. Mine come to your inbox Monday through Friday, and Penna Dexter's arrives on Saturday, but we've posted hers right now on the John Market Mismatch. And it's amazing how many people I know that support Point of View, listen to Point of View, but don't know that they can actually receive these Viewpoints commentaries. So let me encourage you to do so. Pennis talks about the fact that according to Fortune magazine, the CEO of Ford Motor Company says he thinks America needs a wake-up call. And then when he was doing a podcast, said his company has 5,000 open jobs for mechanics. These jobs pay six-figure salaries. And I will add to that another individual I saw interviewed the other day that says he has thousands of openings for electricians. I know how well individuals that are able to do welding are doing right now. My first job before I went to college was in a machine shop. I met some of the people that were machinists, some of the people were welders. I worked alongside them, and they've done relatively well. And if we're going to be bringing manufacturing back to our shores, Dr. Merrill Matthews, the need is even greater. And it seems to me that the head of Ford Motor Company, Jim Farley, says maybe the biggest problem is the lack of trade schools.
Right, and manufacturing is exactly down now. We don't have the people working it that we did in the past. And, you know, it goes back to an issue. For years, Democrats have pushed the notion that when you got out of high school, you ought to go to college. And we're going to make it cheap for you to go because we're going to subsidize it and make sure there's lots of loans out there to get you through college. And that was never a good idea. So I'm for anybody going to college who wants to go to college. And if you're not sure and you want to start a job and then maybe take some college classes at community college in the evening or something, that's great. But not everybody should or really needs to go to college. And in many cases, you can go out and get started in a lot of jobs. There are high-paying jobs out there in the energy industry and engineering and other areas. Plumbers make really good money at times.
Yes,
Electricians can make really good money. And you don't, if college isn't your thing, you shouldn't necessarily do that until you really want to go.
One of the things we talked about in terms of trade schools, you and I were talking off air, but it's worth mentioning that, and this goes back more than a decade, but we used to, on a regular basis, have Tom Pauken on this program, and he was part of the workforce initiative that was in the state of Texas, and he was talking about trade schools. I remember my father, when he was running for the California Assembly, he talked about that as well, because because he went to a high school where you either were headed towards college, you were headed to a trade, and they did all sorts of things to train individuals to be effective in the trades. And we somehow bought this notion that everybody needs to go to college, and not everybody needs to go to college.
Yeah, you need to go to college where they have a water slide, and you can, go to Texas Tech and go and have your water slide and have your very nice dorm, and at the end of the day, walk out and owe $200,000 that the federal government subsidizes for you, and we add to more national. No, this is very timely and something we certainly need. I know in my own life, my brother-in-law, who actually is a college graduate, he graduated from Penn State, but he's been an electrician. He didn't like being an engineer. He wanted to actually work with his hands, and he's a fine electrician, but he's an electrician. Not an engineer, even though he has an electrical engineering degree.
Isn't that something?
And we have our best friends growing up. Our kids lived next door for years. The three boys, they've all now gone to junior college and done things like that. But they have a very successful welding business. And they were homeschooled. They're very well educated, very well read. But they have a very successful welding business because that's what they want to do. That's what they enjoy. And I do think, we did have, and I grew up in a time where the expectation was you're going to college and that's good, but everybody's going to college. And there are some who didn't need to go to college, and they've incurred debt and then found out that they didn't need to go to college. And so I think this is something, we need to be talking about, and actually the church needs to be talking about as well, in directing young people in jobs that AI will never. It'd be interesting. Can AI fix my toilets that are running? I can go on YouTube and try to look for myself, but that, as my wife knows, that's usually a huge failure. And so I think this is good. We need to be talking about this. We need to be encouraging young people.
And you see even the complaints now today that college is they're graduating people who aren't trained for a job. But if you remember historically, a college was to get a liberal arts education.
Right. Yeah.
It wasn't to train me to be a draftsman or things of that nature. That has evolved over time. But I still go back to the notion that college should be training people in the liberal arts. And then if you want to get in business, economics, or things of that nature, you get that training while you're there as well. But college was never really meant to be something that trained you in just this blue collar skills. And yet there's sort of this notion that kids ought to be able to come out and be trained by college for those things, and I'm not sure it was really that goal initially.
It wasn't either. And of course, the other issue, I think, is, of course, the issue of entitlement that as well, and that is, well, it is nice to go to this wonderful little dorm and have parties and all sorts of things, but, the reality is this isn't going to work out quite the way you expected. And we started with a story that you just couldn't believe, the idea of you can't sell Christmas trees. Here's another one of those where they were interviewing, and I don't know if you've seen this, but this has gone all viral, of interviewing an individual that receives food stamps. And she's a SNAP recipient, and she was horrified to find out that she can no longer buy junk food. And so she says, why they do that? What's the point of food stamps if it's just for real food? I don't know what Trump is doing. And you just have this mindset that you say, this has got to be Babylon Bee, but this is the world that we live in. And it seems to me that sometimes it would be helpful to educate young people to really recognize that it's going to be a difficult world. You're going to have to be prepared to do something that is going to be a job skill that's going to work. And you can't live on food stamps the rest of your life. And if nothing else, maybe try to find some places where AI is not going to replace your job.
Or maybe we just give universal base income, and just stay home and play games all day.
This is
not an option.
This is not good for the future of Western civilization.
A lot of young men are doing that already.
That is the problem, isn't it?
That's why I never wanted a house with a basement, because I didn't want my children in the basement.
Well, we've been critical enough, but if nothing else, let me just mention a couple of things. First of all, if you find yourself during this Christmas season finding out that you weren't allowed to sing Christmas carols or sell Christmas trees or something like that, you might want to contact contact First Liberty. If you'd like to know a little bit more about some of the articles that Dr. Merrill Matthews has written, you can see those as well on our website at pointofview.net. And as we just pointed out, on Monday, I hope you'll join us because Howard Goldthwait from First Liberty is going to take us through some of the kinds of things we need to teach our kids. I wish these books were in every public school, but we know that's not going to happen. But it's something that should be in your home, and so we'll talk about some of those resources as well. If you find yourself wanting to maybe listen to this again, click on the button that says Watch or Listen, and you can see the podcast. Go to YouTube or Facebook and see it again as well. But most importantly, I hope you'll have a great weekend. And next week is Christmas week, but we will be broadcasting, well, not on Christmas Day, but on many of the other days. And so I hope that you'll join us then. As always, I want to thank Megan for help engineering the program. Steve, thank you for producing the program. Enjoy the weekend. See you back here on Monday on Point of View.
Do not miss the fact that this is an exciting time in America. Record numbers of Gen Z returning to church, reading the Bible. God is clearly moving. But it's also a critical time. Without trustworthy biblical guidance, without spiritual mentors willing to disciple, those young people full of zeal today could be led astray tomorrow. And that's why I urge you to partner with Point of View and equip the mentors the next generation needs. When you support Point of View, you provide a wealth of resources to equip Americans to think biblically about every issue relevant to life today. Your support could supply the tools that someone needs to apply biblical truth in discipleship. So partner with us today, and your gift will be doubled through December 31st. So give today at pointofview.net, or you can call us 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.